You can tell by the yellowing of it. And the other one is obviously a wire print. That thing. So it's like, well, of course one was printed 20 years after the fact. They don't even look the same. Type thing. So anyway, so that's, what are you doing?
So that, no,
Pointing that at me.
no, I know, scared, right? Because the camera's at you now. It's like funny. So with the magnification view, so it just, you do the object view, the surface view, and the magnification view.
Right,
to
and in the
depend.
object view, this is what we're looking at, so forth. For example, on older prints and that type of thing, when you do an object view and you kind of do it like this, you'll see what's called a color differentiation, which means a mirroring, or you'll see the highlights come out nice and shiny, but in the shadow areas, they're dull. That's called the differentiation. That'll tell you, give you an indication as to the process that it was used, and also an indication of time type setup.
So like on a type 1, like the Marilyns, the Norma Jeans, actually we have for the covers.
The Andre Dion's.
Yeah.
Or
Well,
Davians.
yeah. Yeah, so those were type 1s. Those would be first generations.
Right. And that's what, because the type 1, type 2 thing is kind of, it's the first generation, which I need to explain.
Type 1, yeah. Type 1, what is that? It's just really first
it says
generation.
It is. It's a print made directly from the original negative.
Now, so
that's
does
the
it...
First generation.
First generation, but what if it's printed of the era? Like, so let's say it's of the negative printed in 1950 versus from the negative printed in 1980.
Okay. For example, like those prints, I really didn't check. I knew it was an original print, but I'm not sure if it was done like in 1970.
That was the small ones. Those were the small ones, which were Barris. Those were the Barris.
Right. I'm talking about the Marilyn, before she was Marilyn, actually.
Norma Jean. The Norma Jeans. Well, obviously those were stamped 1950. Those were of the era. They were printed of the era.
Right. So, well, actually, I don't think there was a date stamp on it. There was a photographer's stamp, but I don't remember. It might have been anyway. So that's where you check it, and if it is, then that's what you check out, because then you look at, okay, now was that print? That's a print from the negative. But was that print the print that was used to make the cover? I really don't think so, because it's not a fair type gloss, and it's an odd size type thing. It might be, but I'd have to look at it to really do a deep look at it type thing. But that's the type of thing, that we would go in, that I would like to go into on it. As a matter of fact, this is the page that I would do it. Talk about primary support, image color, so forth, and designate all these things out. And these are the things we use to reference, to go into a reference library. I check out the Rochester Institute of Technology library to find, this is going back to, for example, when you had those cabinet cards that were album imprints, to go in and check those. Victor mentioned that he's going to be getting some plate negatives or plate prints in. Check those out, that you can really more or less date those type of things. So we can date pretty much when the image was taken by a clothes, by the people that are in it, what they're wearing. For example, the Maryland shots of George Barris, obviously done in the 60s, because look at what she's wearing. That's that type of thing.
Well, yeah, like on those, they did have a stamp on it. It had 1950 stamped, and I think it said Modern Man, and then also for the
That was
1948, and then 1948 for the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I meant even the George Barris. So we know when it was taken.
Yeah.
We do an object view to determine that, yes, and even a magnification view, yes, this is an original print from the original negative type thing. Then we look at, that's where the magnification, we look at the layer structure of the paper and the actual, it's going to 50, I'm looking at the actual paper fibers. Where is the image compared to the paper fibers? If it's printed into them, or if it's on top of the fibers and so forth. And then that'll also give me an indication as to how thick the graded layer is, which would be an indication of the paper style. Now those are printed on a nice double weight paper stock, paper surface. So yeah, that is a paper of the era, and that would be the paper that would be used
right.
for that process.
Right.
So it's all that type of, so it's looking at the image type thing, and then analyzing it type thing. For example, looking at the grain structure, I noticed that it's of coarse grain, which means he used high-speed film. Look at the image. Yeah, they're candid shots done handheld in her house type thing. So they would be using a high-speed film to get that kind of picture. Therefore, you have all these elements that match up, that come together and say, yes, this works out in that sense.
Excellent.
So